I've now moved inside to strip down the bumper and do the cutting work on that. So the first thing you need to do is remove the fog lights. I've already unplugged them on the back side of the bumper. Then you have to pull the surround off. Should just unclip if my memory serves me rightly. Work your way around it. That comes out. That won't be used again going forward. And then there are 4 torque screws to remove to get the light fitting itself out. Find out which ones those are. Possibly that. Let's see. So yeah, so 4 torque screws to remove. Try not to drop them, but it doesn't really matter because it will only fall down to the floor behind. Not actually sure whether you need these. I'm guessing you might need these screws for to fit the fog lights to the new surrounds. So check on that on the instructions later. So 4 screws out, and I'm hoping that can just, yeah, then the fog light just lifts out. And I say we'll need to use those for obviously as part of the new installation. So we just set those aside. And I think the rest of that plastic surround that you see inside there, that all just gets discarded once we cut it away. So the next stage of the process is to cut away these fog light housings. They're held on by 4 tabs. Looks like there's a slot with some resin or bonding agent, whatever, that was extruded into it, or maybe it was just heated. Can't really tell at the moment. I'm going to try and cut away that that bonded section with the Dremel, and then we'll see how that comes away, and hopefully do that in each 4 corners, and that'll bring it away. Now the other end's going to be slightly trickier because my fog light housing has come away, so I've reattached these with copious amounts of tiger seal. So these 2 here are going to be a bit of a nuisance. The other 2 are the standard fitting, so they should come away okay, but not sure about the other side. See how we go. Now the next stage of the process is to attach the cutting templates to the back of the bumper. In terms of locating these, although mine's somewhat broken off and it doesn't appear to be related to what I've just cut away, but there's a bit of a tag here, and there's also a similar tag down the bottom here. So these 2 extended sections sit either side of those tags, and then you may not pick it up on the video, but there's a plastic ridge line that runs along here, and that is where the template pushes up to against that edge. And then similarly down on this bottom edge there's also, well, it's actually top edge in reality, but there's also a there's a ridge line through here again, which I push the tape up against. And then once that's in place, mask it into place to hold it, and then you're supposed to go along and draw in the edge and also the drill holes. Fortunately, my daughter's a bit of an artist, so she's got a white pen that's coming in quite handy, and you just basically need to work your way around, marking the cut edge, ready to be drilled later on. So just really a case of going along, doing these through here, along the edge, and so on. And then the idea, I think, is you obviously take the template away, which is probably not a bad idea, just in case anything happens to it when you're trying to do the cutting exercise. So that's obviously quite important, just in case I have to stick this thing back on because something moves or something's not quite right. It'd be good to keep the original without it getting damaged, really. So again, just whizzing along the edges here, filling in the drill holes, and so on along here, around the edge. Sorry, I might be jogging the camera now. It's starting to reach a bit far. Lock these in here, in there, and then last edge really. This top edge up here. I think that's it then, that's all the way around. This seems to fairly closely match the current hole, as does this edge here and this edge here, so again that's probably sort of helpful locator really. So I think that's all marked up okay, and then I'm going to whip that off and then start cutting and drilling, see how that goes. So the next stage of the process, having removed the paper template, is to cut along the white lines. I'm going to use the Dremel. I'm just a bit conscious as to whether the heat will affect the paint on the far side. So I'm going to go at fairly low speed, and I'm going to try a section first and then see how it feels on the far side. So let's see how we go. So that's the holes cut. We then have a series of, and I've also drilled the holes for the fixings. And we then have a series of J-clips to install over the holes. Not sure how easy that's going to be. There's a screwdriver, I think, to help that on with. Actually, let's go that way, doesn't it? Because it's going to be screwed on from the outside. It's possibly easier said than done, isn't it? Oh, no, there we go. In line with the hole, and we just need to work our way around. Shan't really all of those, just putting those clips on, see how that goes. So that's hole cut, J clips attached. You need to probably prise those open a little bit before you try and push them onto the plastic, because it's quite difficult, otherwise they're quite pinched up. And then on the light fitting itself, there's a metal bracket to go on. It's fairly obvious from the instructions which side that goes on, and it's got the way it's arranged, it's got, you can see that there now. got like a toothed end at one end that goes between two prongs, so you can't get it the wrong way around. And it's bolted through from the front. And then this is offered up on the opposite side. On the side where the washer bottle is, there's a extra tang on the plastic, which I think is to help clip the washer pipes too. And then basically that comes up through that hole, and then there's a little, you can see there's a little clip that clamps over. In fact, there's a couple of those actually I haven't noticed before. There's another one down this edge here. So you hook those in, and then the rest of it then is secured by the J-clips. And I'll just go around hopefully and see, hoping the holes are aligned. I'll just flip it over now and just screw fix those on. So this is looking on the outside now, on that side of the vehicle. Left hand side as you look from the front. I'm probably actually not going to screw these in yet, because when I'm doing the other end, I don't want to, with the bumper flipped over, I don't want to damage the light fitting, so I'll leave that task for tomorrow. So the next stage of the process, having cut the holes and put the J clips in place, is obviously to fit the sort of primary light fitting. Now these are marked on the inside. You probably can't see that from there, but it says top right. Like I said, I want to say top left. I assume by that they mean the right hand side of the car as you're sitting in the car looking forward, because the only reason I say that is that it's got this extra tang on here which needs to go on the washer fluid bottle end of the bumper, because I think the pipes get held behind that go off to the bottle. So it's a case of inserting obviously that tang first. As I mentioned last night, there's a couple of pegs or elements along the bottom here that need to clip underneath the bodywork, and then it's a case of working your way around, just putting the screws in the various holes. See how that goes and how well these are lined up. That one there's not tightening, which is the one on this side. It's quite raised above the bumper there, so I'm not convinced the screw is going to be long enough. This side here went okay. So I think I'll need to find a longer screw for that one. Okay, I've realised there are actually two larger screws in the pack, which obviously go in those two fixings around beside the driving light. So I've put those in and they bite up nicely. So that's all of those screws installed. There's then two holes along the top edge above the driving light, and you have to drill a 2.5mm hole through the bumper in those two locations, and then install another couple of screws there. One. You have to do this one a little bit on a slant because the driving light itself gets a bit in the way of the drill. Right, and with those two done, case of screwing those in. Again, as they're only tapping into the plastic, there's no J-clip in these two. I wouldn't go too tight with your screws in case you strip the plastic. I'm really just pinching them up, really. Okay, good. That's that side in place. I'm now going to do obviously the far side, and then I'll bring you back after that when we go on to the next stage. So a couple of issues with the left hand side as you look from within the car. Firstly, I had a bit of an alignment issue with the hole for this screw here and the J clip, so I had to sort of realign that. The other thing that concerns me slightly is although done to the template, the extra distance, that notch seems to project beyond the fitting. If you look at the far end, it has a similar notch, but it doesn't project very far at all, and it's just enough to clear what I assume is the adjuster for the light itself. So I'm just slightly concerned that this hole at this end might project beyond the surround. Obviously I haven't got the surround, as I said earlier, because that's away being painted. I'm hoping it's going to come out far enough to cover that hole. Other than that, it went okay, so we'll now move to the other side to show adding the fog lights and the wiring. So the next stage of the process, working on the rear side of the bumper, is to install the fog lights that you took off your original, and these basically sit between the metal bracket and then two projecting plastic supports. And there's a little ridge around these that locates into these holes, so it seats itself quite accurately into those. Now on the radiator side, the metal bracket, you use the bolts or machine screws. They have a spring washer between the head and the main washer. They go into the metal bracket. And then in terms of the plastic support end, I realised that the two larger screws that I used for the side of the driver light to reach through to get to the J-clip were actually intended for these two connections here, because the other screws are too small to bite into the plastic support. Now luckily the torque screws that I kept back from the old fog light fixings will work in there. Just go carefully, because they are the same, although the same diameter as the ones that we used for the driver light. They're a slightly finer thread, so I'll just go carefully so you don't end up breaking the plastic that these screw into, and then they tap into there. There's two of those. And just do those up carefully so you don't get too carried away and break anything. And then that will see the fog lights reattached. So the next stage is to rewire the fog lights and bring the wires in for the driving lights themselves, which I've described before as sort of loom one. So in terms of the fog light, that's relatively straightforward. It's got like a slot that's open on one side and not on the other, so you can't physically get it in wrong. Obviously that just reconnects into the holder there, so I think that's going that way. Yep, there we are, and that just goes up until it clicks. So that's that back in. There was a little clip on the side here for the wire, which I've just attached to the piece of plastic that's down the side here as part of the fog light fitting, which just keeps that wire a bit controlled, if you like. And then the driving light, again, it's got a shallow notch and a deep notch, so again it can only go in one way. See which way that goes. Obviously that way. So that's that into there, which is fair enough. And then what we need to do then is to route that cable and cable tie it to the parking sensor cable that runs along to the far end, and obviously then repeat the process at the far end. The other bit to notice at this end is that the washer bottle pipe gets clipped behind this projecting lug that we mentioned previously, just to help secure that. So that's now the wiring loom cable tied to the existing wires for the parking sensors and fog light that runs across to the left as you look from the interior of the car. Other points to note, I decided to take the washer pipe up and over and cable tie it to the washer jet, mainly because I was a little bit concerned about it rubbing against some of these projecting screws. Might wear a hole in it eventually, so I've looped that up and over. Hopefully that will work when I get on the car. I'll have a look. And the other thing I've done is the wires to this driving light were left bare. They didn't have a insulation tape covering for protection, and I was a little bit concerned about it rubbing up here, so I've covered that with insulation tape as well, just to be on the safe side. The other thing I might do before I put the bumper back on the car is possibly a Tiger Seal Bonder piece of plastic across here, just in case that hole is too large, and it'll make my life a bit easier trying to fill it then from the far side if there's some sort of backing piece on there. Other than that, I think we're ready to put that back on the car. So we're now ready to put the bumper back on. Again, apologies for the wind noise at the moment. So our new connectors down this end to link up nicely. Obviously shan't bother filming this part because obviously you've seen the bumper coming off before. Well, just managed to get that back together as the weather is turning. It's starting to drizzle now. Don't look too bad. So it went on, the bumper went on easier than it came off, let's put it that way. Obviously can't put the outer casings on yet, and I've still got the cabin wiring to do. That'll be for another day. So the next stage of the process inside the cabin is to strip away the central console, because we need to bring some wiring up from where we came through the bulkhead behind the glove box. Across the back here there's a plug that we then need to make a connection into, which I think is the power feed for the this side of the relay. And then we're going to need to take the binnacle and the dials out. But first of all, we'll strip this away. I'll do this as a time lapse. There's plenty of videos online showing you how to remove this central panel. So once you've removed the front face, the sort of fascia and the radio, we then actually also have to remove the nav screen if you've got one. I'd actually already removed the 4 Torx screws that hold it in place when I was taking the sort of the fascia off, and then that basically you can get that far enough forward then to reach the the 3 plugs that connect into the back. They're all color coded, you can't get them wrong, and they have a variety of sort of locking mechanisms that you have to clip and unclip to get them off. And the reason for removing that is we then have to feed the Loom 4 cable through behind here to reach the dials and eventually the button. And the Loom 4 cable comes up the side beside the glove box. I think it gets cable tied or taped to various parts of the loom up here just to hold it in place. And then part of that Loom 4 has a pin and a brown connector which needs to go into one of the pins on this yellow plug, which actually comes out the back of the radio, or at least the lower dash element. There's a red insert that you have to prise out from within the plug. You basically use a screwdriver down the side to get to that, and that's basically this little element here. And then once that's out, you can then insert a small screwdriver and withdraw a brown wire from the back there, which is where we're going to splice into effectively. The instructions show you which wire you need to take out. It's quite well, quite a decent diagram in there showing which wire to extract. And then, as I understand it, we'll be inserting that into the back of the grey plug, and then we'll be attaching another plug to the end of this existing wire, and I think that then gets plugged into this connector. So that sort of brings the power into the sort of dashboard side of the relay, if you like. And then the other thing to do down the side is there are a couple of earth connections, connection points on the side, and we have to attach an earth from Loom 4, this one here, into the side of that, and I'll probably show you an image of that later on when I come to do that. So I've inserted the bare pin brown wire from Loom 4 into the back of the grey plug, and then once that's inserted, you'll hear it click as it goes in, and then you install the red element at the front there, and again that just pushes in and clicks tight. And then the next bit is to add a plug to this brown exposed wire here, which will then link to this plug. And the element for that in the pack is this connector with a red end. You have to withdraw the red section out of the plug, and then you insert the brown wire into the correct hole there. Again, it shows you in the instructions which one to go into, and then you push that red thing back in, and I believe that then locks it in place, and then that should just then be able to then be inserted into the other part of the plug that's hanging there by the yellow wire. So that's now with the brown wire that we've taken out of the current car loom fixed into its plug, and then we're going to plug those two together, and that sort of gives us the sort of, again, I'm not sure the electrical terminology, but the sort of bypass splice, if you like, that brings the feed to power our switch. Well, I've been having real fun and games with this connector. I taped it all up nicely and put the foam around it that the instructions give you, but then found that it was very difficult to get that to plug into the back of the radio unit, and this then fouled the control for the vent duct here. So what I've ended up doing is stripping back some of the yellow tape around the existing loom so that I can move this connector back underneath the nav screen in order to give more play at this end for this connector and to avoid fouling stuff. So I'm now going to tape this up on here, put some more foam around this, and then hopefully that will then work. So having stripped back and taken the brown wire back along the existing loom, I've then taped the new connector on the side there and wrapped the whole lot, taking this brown wire back, and then that's the Loom 4 cable you see in the background there. and then this should now be able to nicely come underneath the nav unit and give enough flexibility for this to reconnect the radio. So don't make the same mistake I did there of taping this connector too close to the existing plug. So you need to strip back the yellow insulation tape and the black fibrous tape underneath that to get the brown wire far enough back that this can then sit underneath the nav nicely without it fouling anything. So we'll now try for the umpteenth time to put this this middle section back together. Well, after much fun and games, that's the dash back together. It was quite tricky because I forgot that the nav unit has to hook through this gap first, and those lugs drop down into the plastic, and then you push that back against. I was trying to position this over top of that, and every time I pushed it up, the sat nav unit moved back. It took me quite a while to work out what I was doing wrong there. Right, so having done that, then the next bit to do, if we come down the glove box side, is to attach the earth, and you'll see there are those two Torx fittings there in the middle of my image. I'm going to use the lower one of those two, and we've got an eye there which I'm going to fit over the end of that, and then I'm probably going to tape some of this wiring to that major loom there just to keep it up out of the way and tidy. So that's the earth wire installed. I've then taped sections of that wire to the main wiring loom there, and then I've coiled up the excess, which is the end of loom 3, beginning of loom 4. You see the plug connector there with the yellow wire. I've coiled that up and then taped that together and taped it to some loom up there just to keep it out of the way. The reason there's an excessive amount of wire there is that on the left-hand drive models, the loom 3 wire has to run all the way along the bulkhead underneath the scuttle panel and enter on the opposite side of the car. So hence for the right-hand drive British version, you end up with an excessive amount of cable left. So just coil that up there. So I'm just about to put the glove box back on, and then that will just leave the work on the installing the switch itself and routing the cables behind the dials. So we're now on the final stage of the process, which is to feed the loom 4 cables behind the instrument cluster and install the switch on the, you won't see it from where your video is at the moment, on the right hand side of the steering wheel alongside the side air vent. So we need to remove the shroud and the instruments themselves, apparently according to the instructions, but we'll see whether we can get away with leaving them in once we've got the shroud off. Powerful UK have done a video showing how to remove this and the instruments. Basically there's a couple of Torx screws in the top here, some clips to come off the bottom edge where the sort of material shroud meets the steering wheel, and then we should be able to pull that forward, remove the start stop button, I think that's held in by some clips, and undo the connector there. That will then come out, and then there are some Torx screws to remove the instruments themselves. So we'll see how that goes. Well, I have to say I didn't really enjoy that experience, and I don't think I'd want to do it again, mainly because I was worried about breaking something. So you take the Torx screws at the top, which is fine, and then the bottom section is held in by these two plastic lugs that have a metal clip on them, and those clips go into these slots here and here. And that was very difficult to get out, and I was very concerned I was going to break it. But eventually the right hand clip pinged off, and then managed to get the left hand clip out. There's also 2 plastic lugs that just locate into these white elements here. These little tabs with an insert on them. So I'm glad that's done, so I wouldn't want to do it again, I don't think. And now we're just going to see where we go with the wiring. So I'm going to have to at least loosen off the instrument cluster, because I can't quite reach the loom 4 wiring, which I think is what you're seeing in the corner shot there at the moment. I don't think the plug will fit through that gap anyway. So there are 2 screws at the bottom and then 1 at the top, which I'm going to now endeavour to remove and see if we can bring that forward. Okay, so what I did was I loosened off and removed the screws from the instrument cluster, and then I just brought it forward enough to be able to get hold of the loom 4 wire down in this corner here. I didn't want to go to the trouble of trying to unplug this thing and then plug it back in again, because it looked a bit tricky to get to the cable connector. And I also didn't want to fully take this out of the aperture, because again it was quite tricky. So I managed to just get it forward enough past this, which in itself was a bit of a juggling act, and then managed to get the wire. Now at the moment I've brought the wire, there's a gap down here, I brought the wire across in front of the instruments, and I think that'd be fine. This piece doesn't move, it's the fixed part of the adjustable steering wheel, so I don't see any reason why that cable can't run across the front here rather than taking it around the back. And then we're going to need to cut our switch into this in this piece of the panel here. So we'll probably start that next and see how we go with that before we close this aperture up. So this is now with the switch masking template stuck to the dashboard. We have to drill some small sort of pilot holes around the edge to enable then a saw cut to be made, and then obviously there's one larger hole in the centre, which is for the cabling and the switch itself to pass through. Okay, so that's with the pilot holes drilled, just about to make those out, and the centre hole. The idea with the centre hole was, you can see from here, there's a secondary piece of plastic some distance back from the face of the dash, and we've actually got to drill through that as well in order to bring the cable through. There's not enough depth there to fit the back of the button and the incoming plug and the wire. So you've actually got to drill through that second layer. And unfortunately, with my drill bit, it's got a sort of a raised collar around the edge, and I can't actually get it through that hole and out and into the back of the piece of plastic behind. So I think I'm going to have to cut out the aperture first fully, and then drill through that secondary piece of plastic behind. So that's the basic aperture formed. What I did was initially I went round with a scalpel and cut down through the sort of textured surface finish, and then there's a thickness of foam behind that before we get to the plastic backing. So I cut through that with a scalpel all the way around the edge, and then very carefully prised the inner sections away to leave a nice straight edge. I was then going to use my Dremel to try and cut through the plastic down in the recess, but I couldn't really get the blade in there very effectively, and I was very concerned about damaging the surrounding dashboard. So what I've ended up doing there is stitch drilling within the aperture to try and get the shape. And what I'm going to do now is file those edges down. But I think that's probably the safest way of doing it, and then we can think about drilling the hole through the lower plastic that you can see in the background there. So after a bit of fettling with the small file, managed to get that to the right size to take the plastic insert, and then I've drilled through behind there, which I'm hoping is aligned such that I can feed the cable through into the back of the switch. And in terms of where I'm hoping to take the wire, I think if I can take it under here, then it's basically an open void under there. I can then bring it up through that hole, so I might just need to poke a piece of wire or something through that hole in order to attach the cable and then put it through. Let's see how that goes. So what I've done is I've inserted a length of garden wire through that hole and then it's I managed to thread it through behind here. I'm then going to tape the connector to that, and then hopefully I can pull that round and through that hole. Let's see how that goes. I have to say that was quite successful. Just gently pulling that through the hole worked well. Let's see now how the switch works and whether it will push back far enough into that hole. So there we are with the switch in place. Don't make the same mistake I did. The plastic margin that you see there around the switch goes on after the switch is installed. I mistakenly thought that you put the margin on and then push the switch through it, which is not the case. So basically you have an insert on the far side of the dash that you push through the hole that you've made. You then thread your cable with the connector through that hole. You then attach the connector to the switch. You push the switch back into the cradle and it locks in place with two metal tangs. And then you add the margin on after that, and that again locks in with two, in this case, plastic tangs. I was struggling to get it to push up tight though, so I ended up filing back there's a small ridge on the back of that margin plastic. I ended up filing that off in order to get the tangs to lock in place. So here's the finished switch install. Very happy now that's completed. It has a background light, so the sort of diagrammatic headlamp symbol there and the number 2 light up in the dark, so you can see where the switch is, and then the small light at the top there's an orange light that shows when it's been pressed, and basically it will come on with the main beam, not with the dip lights, and obviously you then have the opportunity to either have it to come on or not. So yeah, quite happy with that, and now we'll show you what the outside looks like. So this is the final arrangement from the outside. Very pleased with how those look. The outer surround there comes as a sort of standard grade plastic, so if you want those to match your bodywork you'll need to get those sprayed or spray them yourselves. I think that's certainly worth doing. I think they look a lot better matched into the car bodywork. So yeah, very happy with how that's turned out. I'd like to give a mention to Derek Softly of Consolidated Tools. That's where I got my this light set up from. Extremely good value for money, and I had a few queries and Derek was very helpful and responded very quickly to those, so you won't go wrong if you want to purchase this setup. I'm getting them from Consolidated Tools, and you'll find him on eBay. So yeah, if you try that, I hope that goes well for you. This is, let's say, the first of my attempts at a YouTube video, so please like and subscribe. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do another one yet, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you very much for your time. Hope that was helpful.